start this video off with total and complete transparency, I don't like painting water with acrylic paint. I get lots of requests to do tutorials for acrylic water paintings, but I don't like doing it. I prefer so much more painting water with oil paints, but it's requested so often and I decided to challenge myself. So I did this little transparent water piece with acrylic paints, focusing on the oh so very difficult acrylic blending techniques. I do personally think that if you're more of a beginner intermediate painter, that acrylics are a great way to step into the painting medium. Oils, for me, were a little bit trickier to get used to, but now that I know how they work, I love them so much. I prefer to use them over anything else. If you're someone who loves working with acrylics and you've wanted to get into water, here's a way for you to step into it. It's not an easy tutorial, I will say that. It's got lots of blending in it, lots of details, lots of like little tiny tricky bits. But if you're a beginner and you like this painting, try it anyway. Push yourself. I'm always about pushing yourself. If you really want to go for something that you think maybe out of your comfort zone, do it anyway. So we're gonna get into this tutorial, but I want to talk real quick about the materials I use. Obviously, I have my acrylic paints. I have an array of paintbrushes. I like to use synthetic soft bristle paintbrushes, and I just use a whole bunch of different types. I'll let you know what I'm using as I'm going along. I have a cup of water. I've got a palette to mix on. I've got a paper towel to wipe my little brushes off on. Things that you don't necessarily need. I have a little scraper knife so that I can clean off my palette really easy. And then I also have a little palette knife so I can mix things up easy, but I don't always use it. Sometimes I like to mix with my brush too, so up to you on how you want to do it. Also, this board that I'm using, I wish you told me. Wish you told me how big you were. 14 by 11 inches. You can paint smaller, you can paint bigger, do what you want. So let's officially get into the tutorial. So obviously I'm starting by putting my paint on my palette. You can use just primary colors, yellow, red, blue, and white, but if you want the exact colors, I have titanium white, cadmium red, yellow, medium, azo, cyan blue, and phthalo blue. Don't worry about having the exact colors. Don't worry about having two blues. Just do what you can. We're gonna start by mixing up a sky blue color. So we're taking some of our blues, a good chunk of white, a little bit of red to just mute it down a little bit. And we're mixing up this sky blue color that we're gonna start to shift slowly to a lighter color. Big brush, fairly big, so I've got a lot of canvas to cover here. I've got those synthetic bristles that I really like. I'm adding a little bit of water and I'm starting to apply my blue paint just to the very top, back and forth, getting a really nice, even, clean coat. I'm gonna bring that down just a little bit. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start to add more white so we can shift the color down to a little bit of a lighter color, like how the sky actually looks in real life. If you look at the sky, oftentimes the parts that look higher to us in the sky are gonna be darker than the parts that are closer to the horizon. So very slowly you can see me grabbing little bits of white, mixing it into my blue, and then brushing it across really smoothly, and I'm able to get this blend effect with acrylics that's kind of tricky to achieve. The way I'm doing this is working really fast, very quickly adding some white to my paint, and then brushing it across, which keeps the paint wet still, so I'm moving so fast that nothing has gotten a chance to dry. So then I want to mix up a darker blue kind of teal color. I'm sorry, I'm a total ding dong and I mixed this just off screen. I'm very sorry about it. But I'm just taking blue, yellow, and red, mixing up a dark teal kind of color. I'm taking a flat angled brush and I'm very slowly drawing in my horizon line. I want to do this very carefully because I don't want a wiggly little horizon line. I want something that's very smooth, very clean, straight across. A lot of people will use painter's tape and then paint over the tape so that you get a nice clean line, but I'm lazy, so I don't do that. I'm bringing that color down a little bit more, and then again, I'm adding a little bit of white to my teal color so I can start to shift the color to a little bit of a lighter color and give it a blended kind of, what do you call it? Ombre? Is that what they call it back in the day? I don't know. Doing it again, adding more white, adding a little bit of blue as well so I can give it a color that kind of is starting to reflect more of what's in the sky. And I'm brushing that across, very quickly putting this paint on my canvas because I really want to have the chance to blend it, which is hard to do with acrylics because they dry so ding dang fast. And as I get to the bottom, I'm using a much lighter blue, as you see, almost a blue that's very similar to the top of what our sky color is. And I kind of have it stop at this like little wiggled point because then I'm gonna mix up a green, which again, mixed off screen, very sorry. And I'm gonna take this green and I'm going to draw out where our closest transparent wave is. It's like at this part, the water is coming up and there's a lip, and the green part is us seeing straight into the water where the wave is before it crashes. If that makes sense. It might not make any sense at all. But I'm mixing this green up. It's just basically our light blue with a little yellow added. And then I'm starting to darken it slightly with little bits of blue and little bits of red, because I want this to shift to more of a sand color, like we're seeing through the water to the sand underneath it. Just kind of tricky. You start to kind of mix up this green brown because you're trying to shift from like this really pretty light green to a weird kind of funky sand brown color. Take your time. This is a hard color to mix. I would recommend, if you're feeling like it's ending up too green, add a little more red to get that more sandy kind of color, but it's okay if it just looks dark green. It just like depends on what your watercolor looks like, what the sand will look like underneath, you know? Don't worry about it. Just make it kind of some kind of brown, green, darkish color. So what we're doing now is we're mixing up another green color that's maybe just slightly darker than the green we've done for our first wave, just like a little bit, very similar. And I'm gonna take it and start drawing in a couple places where our waves are gonna be. So I'm gonna have a few different waves, not too many, but I'm gonna have one that's gonna start here. You can see me drawing this in pretty carefully. I have it taper off at the very end. I'm using that flat brush. I'm giving it like another little tapered bit so it looks like it's got different kinds of movement, moving in slightly different directions. And then I've got this other wave in the back that's a little bit bigger, even though it's a little bit farther away. Usually waves get smaller as they go back, but I wanted this one to be like another big wave rolling into the front. You can see I'm creating a small little peak, and then I have it curved down to give it like a natural water shape to it. I'm dragging my paintbrush across really carefully and generally trying to get some of that blended look to it. And then I mixed up just a slightly lighter green because I wanted to blend a little more with the water. So at the bottom of those waves, I'm taking this lighter green that's a mix between the blue of the water and the green of the wave to try and create the little bit of a transition color. When you're working with acrylics, sometimes they dry so fast, right, that you need to create an in-between color between something that you think is a little too contrasty. So that's what I did with that light green there. I mixed up a slightly darker green as we were moving farther back, that wave back there, because the water is starting to get darker the further away from us it is. And I wanted to make sure I had enough contrast to stand out. And then I'm just taking white with a tiny bit of blue added, and I'm drawing in some spaces where there's crashed foam waves, and it kind of just looks like a choppy little line all the way across. I'm gonna do another one back there, all the way across too, and you can see me just giving it a little bit of texture like there's foam. And then I'm gonna do one more, still taking that same flat angled brush, and I'm gonna tap it all the way back so you can see there's a little bit more foam. And then some right there on that little wave. You don't have to do that one, but I wanted to add a little more foam to a wave that was a little bit closer to us. And then I cleaned my palette by scraping up all the paint, which is so satisfying, it feels so good. And then I decided to start and go in a little more detail on the foam. And what I'm doing is I'm taking a little filbert brush, which has a rounded top, and I'm tapping the color on top of the light blue color we'd made for the foam initially, just to give it a little more texture. I want to show there's some highlight on the foam where the sun's hitting, so I'm keeping it a little bit to the top left of the waves as I'm dabbing it on. Kind of quickly, I'm kind of not worrying too much about the details here. I've sped this up obviously, but I'm honestly going pretty quick on this section. Then I'm taking another little flat brush. It's actually very similar to the brush we had when we were doing the big stuff, but it's just scaled down, so it's a lot smaller. And I want to add a little bit of a shadow underneath the foam to give it a little bit of a dimension to it. So I'm just taking that darker teal color that I mixed up and I'm dragging it underneath the foam just a little bit to show that it's shadowed, like the sun is behind and there's a little bit of a shadow going on. And I do this on that wave back there, and then I also do that on the wave that's just a little bit closer, that's all foamy. But I lighten it up just a little bit because the water underneath is just a little bit lighter. You can see me add just like a little bit of white there. And I fill that all in. And now I'm mixing up a green to add some more dimension to the green parts of our waves. So I want to make the top of them just a little bit darker than the bottom, to have them be defined a little bit more to show that green color coming up. The green color is what the water kind of naturally looks like, and the blue color is what is being reflected from the sky. So the parts that are coming up in the waves, we're seeing the natural color of the water, and all of the lighter blue on the top, that's like the reflection of the sky in the water. So we want to show the darker parts by adding a little tiny bit of a darker green onto these. And you can see, like, obviously those waves have dried by now, so there's not a lot of blending I can do. So what I'm doing is adding a little bit of water and scrubbing on this color now that everything's dry to kind of get like a faux blending effect. I'm doing it for all the green waves except that furthest, closest one to us, because that's gonna get a whole bunch of special detail because it's the closest. So I start adding it in ways where, in like lines and chunks on this wave that's closest to us. I want us to be able to see a lot of detail in this wave because it's so close. So it's gonna have some streaks in it. It's gonna be a little bit darker at the top in some areas, maybe less in others. It's gonna have some chunks of darker green, less chunks. Just wanted to show that it's got an organic shape and that you can see through it to that natural watercolor. And then I mixed up a lighter green because I want to show also that some more light is coming through, because obviously the sun's hitting it from the back. It's almost like it's glowing. We could see through that water. So I want to have some highlights come through as well as the shadowed parts. And I'm kind of streaking it across the bottom of this little green wave too, just to give the ripples in the sand some kind of dimension. When you go to the ocean, you're looking down to the water from the waves. You can see there's ripples in the sand from the water pulling in and out. I also mixed up a little bit of a light blue here, so I want to start adding some detail to the water in the background. So I'm taking a really thin little liner brush and I'm doing really small streaks of this light blue across the whole water in the painting, kind of centering a little bit in the middle because that's where light is going to be focused. But I'm taking it and I'm just doing these totally horizontal streaks, not really, they can have like a little bit of a curve to them, just slightly, so they look organic, but I want them to be about the same angle as the horizon line, so nice and straight. And I'm filling in all those places. This is just like a detail piece to show that there's light reflecting off the undulations in the water way far back. And now I'm making a much lighter blue because I want some of those highlights to stand out a lot more on the water that is closest to us. The sun is going to be hitting in very specific parts of this water, the parts where the lip of the darkest part of the wave is. So just behind where we've done the dark parts of the wave, that's where there's going to be a little bit of highlight because the sun is hitting the back of the waves. So I'm going to make sure I'm having just riding on the very top of the waves a little bit of highlight, and then centering in the middle, dragging that across. Make sure I'm doing that all the way up. I'm not missing any spots. And there's no right or wrong way to do this. I have a vague reference photo. I forgot to mention that this painting's actually in reference to a painting I did on my YouTube channel like years ago, 2 years ago maybe. So I'm not really using a reference photo except that, kind of. So there's no right or wrong way to paint this. Do your own thing. So here I mixed up a brown color that I added a little bit of magenta to. You don't have to use magenta, you can just use red. I just had magenta, I wanted to add it. And I'm creating those little sand streaks that I'm talking about, where the water pulls out and creates these tiny little ripples in the sand that kind of mimic the way the water looks. And so what we're painting here is the sand underneath the water. We're like seeing through the water to the sand. So what we're painting is actually underneath water. And the further it gets from us, the lighter we want the sand to look. So you can see I kind of brush out the ones that are kind of further away. And I don't go too far back because I want that wave, the see-through part of the wave, to show that it's above the sand, that it's higher. And I add some like little darker elements just for funsies. I just like to add a little bit of details here and there. Just wanted to really focus on some of that darker sand kind of look. It is going to be heavily painted over once we add reflections of the water, so don't worry too much about it, because right here actually I'm taking a little bit of a light green that's kind of like the color that we used for that wave that's right there in the front, and I'm painting in streaks over our sand to show where light is hitting on the water that's on the surface. So the sand is underneath, and these streaks we're doing right now are hitting the surface of the water, and you're gonna see me start to add highlights, just slightly lighter over and over again. Yeah, here we go. Went a little bit lighter there, just added a little more white, and I'm streaking it across just to show that light is hitting this water, and that it is water. It's not just like a weird green sand, it's water sitting on top of sand. I'm doing that with a little filbert brush, dragging that along, highlighting that. Also adding a couple more little highlights to the green of the wave, just little details. This is the part of the painting where like, it could be done. You could say, I'm done at this point of the painting, but I want you to push further on the details so you can get to like a level in your painting that you're going to love. So I'm going a little lighter in some of those streaks on the water, really showing the highlights of where the sun is hitting. Staying kind of focused in the center, but making sure I'm getting a little bit on the edges as well. Hitting the tops of those waves so we know that they have some dimension to them, the light is hitting the back of them. And I'm doing it on every level where that blue water is. These are the details that are really going to start to make your painting look real. Like it's a window you could just walk into. So take your time with them. Don't rush them. Here I'm taking a little bit of a light green and kind of just, again, fading that wave up, doing like a faux blending effect where I'm using an in-between color and painting over it to try and get this like blended look so it looks like the wave is blending up into the darker green. Just slowly. These are all details, and if you don't want to do the same details as me, there's nothing wrong with that. You can go rogue, you can do your own thing. This is all up to you. It's your painting. It does not have to be exact to mine. There's nothing wrong with doing your own thing. So I'm adding some more highlights down here just because I wanted to show that it's water again, make it stand out. I'm taking a very light green here, just adding a couple little dots of maybe foam or like extra reflection on our wave that's closest to us here. A couple little streaks, couple little lines, just give it a little more of an organic look. And then, this is a big part, and also a very scary part, I'm drawing in some foam that's gonna be sitting on top of the water in the closest part of the painting to us. This is very scary because we've painted this like beautiful see-through water and now we're kind of adding something on top that possibly could turn out bad. But I say go for it. Don't really stress too much about ruining the painting underneath and just focus on creating these little foam tendrils to give more dimension and interest to your painting. I'm doing little streaks, I'm doing little dots. I'm doing this with a lighter blue color at first, and then, yeah, you can see me doing more little dots there. And then I'm gonna go back in with a brighter white so that I can kind of define everything just a little bit more after I've decided where I want all my details. I just wanna make sure that everything's looking nice and bright. So here you can see me taking the pure white, just plain titanium white, and highlighting kind of on the top of where our little wave tendrils are, these little foamy kind of tendrils. And just focusing on the details, taking my time.
Also, if I'm going too fast for you, please pause this video. There's nothing wrong with that. You can also slow the video down in the YouTube video settings. You can choose to slow it down by like 75 to 50%. Mess around with that. That might be very helpful for you. Doing a couple of more details in that wave that's close to us with some light green. I'm actually using my finger there as a paintbrush. Did you see that? I just like smudge it. Adding some light green streaks to go across. And remember, I'm not looking at a photo of water here. I'm kind of just doing this out of my brain a little bit, and a little bit based off a painting that I'd done years ago. I'm choosing these details however I feel like water would look. It's fanciful. It's not necessarily being super hyper realistic. It's got realism to it, obviously, but it's not necessarily what I'm going for. I'm just looking to get the feel of water. I'm also adding another layer of highlights to that foam back there. You're so close to the end here as we're adding these little highlights onto the foam in the background. Just a couple little areas in that little part of that wave there where it's a little bit crashing. And then again, I'm doing another layer of these highlighted streaks across the water. You can do this as many times as you want. I want to show that there's a little bit of like light sparkle happening here. So I'm making sure I've got a solid amount of contrast in these streaks because I want it to show that it's sunny out. Doing a couple more details on the foam, just because I can. This is the point where you kind of step back from your painting and you look at it as a whole and then choose what details you want to add. Like maybe you want to add a sun, or maybe you want to add some cute little birds, or whatever you want, or maybe like a surfer. You can add whatever you want to your painting, whether it's more details, whether it's new elements like a sailboat, or more highlights, or more shadow, or whatever you want to do. Then what I wanted to do, as per usual, because I can't paint water without adding sparkles to it, I started going in with these tiny little dots of white to create these itty bitty little sparkles that I'm gonna kind of center in the center of our painting. Center in the center, obviously. And I'm just gonna dot those on pretty sparingly. Sometimes I can go overboard with the sparkles. In this one I wanted to keep the sparkles pretty mellow because the sun's still pretty high in the sky. It's not gonna create that many sparkles, but I wanted to show just a little bit of light playing on the water here. But you can put as many or as little sparkles as you want. You don't have to put any sparkles at all. It's all up to you. I'm using a very, very little brush for this, and the whole painting is dried, so I'm able to rest my hand to be able to put these dots on with a lot of control. Try and let your painting dry before you do this last little detail part. If it hasn't dried already, it's probably dry because acrylics dry so fast, but just in case, it's a good idea. If you're gonna have your hand resting on your painting, it probably should be dry. And that is our finished painting. If there's more things you want to do, go for it. If you feel like you're done, that's great too. But this is our finished little acrylic water painting.